Billionaire abandons pregnant wife to show affection to mistress wife's phone call makes him bankrupt. In a city where fortunes are made and broken overnight, love can be both a treasure and a weapon. Imagine a power couple, Michael Whitmore, the suave, self-made millionaire, and Samantha Carter, his devoted, gentle wife. Their romance was once idolized, their future seemingly without limit. But when a seductive, ambitious woman enters the scene, Michael's loyalty begins to crack, leaving his pregnant wife alone and betrayed. How does a man who has everything risk it all for an affair? And how can one fateful phone call topple an empire built on lies? This is a story of heartbreak, revenge, and an unexpected redemption, brimming with twists at every turn. Michael Whitmore wasn't born into wealth. He clawed his way up through grit and ambition, starting life in a modest two-bedroom in Detroit before finding his footing in New York City's concrete jungle. While attending a scholarship program at Columbia, he distinguished himself in business competitions, wowing mentors with his knack for high-stakes negotiation. By 28, he had founded Whitmore and Associates, specializing in boutique real estate ventures that catered to the ultra-rich seeking Manhattan penthouses and Hamptons estates. The city took notice. Magazines labeled him a rising star, and wealthy investors courted him at private clubs. Michael wore success as though it was a bespoke suit stitched to perfection. But success alone couldn't soothe the private longing in his heart, an ache for genuine companionship. That was where Samantha Carter came in. Samantha hailed from quieter roots, raised in Vermont by her father, James Carter, after her mother's passing. She adored painting and interior design, eventually landing a job at Haverford Interiors, a smaller design firm with an uptown address. Thoughtful and creative, Samantha's works exuded warmth, soft color palettes, elegant fabrics, subtle lighting. Her employers boasted that Samantha could transform any space into a graceful haven. Their paths first crossed at a charity auction hosted by Morgan and Harris Associates. Michael was there to curry favor with top investors, but one glance at Samantha's quiet smile sent him in her direction. He found her near a display of paintings, absorbed in the brushstrokes of a cityscape. He joined her, offering a charismatic grin. Beautiful piece, isn't it? Much like its admirer. Cheesy, perhaps, but Samantha blushed and giggled. They talked for hours, ignoring the swirl of socialites. By the end of the night, he'd secured her number, half-jokingly threatening to buy every piece of art in the room if she didn't say yes to a date. A week later, they had their first dinner at a cozy bistro in Brooklyn. Over candlelight, Samantha discovered a layer beneath Michael's polished exterior, a depth shaped by humble beginnings and an earnest desire for something meaningful. He, in turn, found solace in her genuine curiosity. She cared about more than the deal of the day or the next big score. She was fascinated by the inner workings of his mind, by the fragility behind his confident charm. They began a whirlwind romance, rooftop cocktails, weekend getaways to Martha's Vineyard, even volunteering together at local youth programs. Michael introduced her to the lavish corners of his world, five-star dining, exclusive clubs, but Samantha remained her down-to-earth self. She'd rather stroll through the Met holding his hand, discussing Renaissance art, than flaunt new designer clothes. Oddly enough, that was precisely what captivated him. Before long, Michael proposed. On a balmy August evening, on a rooftop overlooking the glittering skyline, he slipped a diamond ring onto her finger and whispered, "You are the life I want to build, Sam." She accepted amid tears of joy, hugging him tight while fireworks from a nearby event burst overhead. Their wedding was a refined affair at the Essex house, attended by close friends, family, and a sprinkling of Michael's business partners. Samantha's father, James, wept tears of pride. Michael's associates toasted him as the unstoppable entrepreneur, praising him for somehow finding time to court a brilliant, kind-hearted woman in the midst of his ascension. That night, in a honeymoon suite overlooking Central Park, they glowed with the optimistic certainty that love could conquer all. Yet, in the months that followed, life's demands began to encroach. Michael's rising profile required near-constant travel. A new crop of investors from Europe needed wooing, while expansions in Florida demanded multiple site visits. Whitmore and associates soared, but so did the stress. Samantha, too, found her workload intensifying as her designs grew in popularity. Projects started stacking up, each client wanting a piece of her distinctive style. Initially, they navigated it well: late-night phone calls, occasional surprise visits. But the seeds of tension were planted. Days turned into weeks where they rarely had dinner together. Michael began returning calls only after midnight, bleary-eyed from business dinners. Samantha sometimes dozed off on her drafting desk, missing his check in texts. Though they tried to keep the flame alive date nights, little gestures of affection, loneliness crept in like a silent intruder. In calmer moments, they would still share coffee in the penthouse, discussing house decor or naming future children. Those intimate flashes reminded them why they fell in love. But the cracks continued to grow, subtle at first: an argument over missed calls, a resentful glance. When one left for yet another work trip, the unspoken worry that perhaps they were drifting apart. They clung to the belief that they'd overcome these busy times. Samantha told herself their bond was too strong to be eroded by a hectic schedule. Michael, though exhausted, basked in the knowledge that he was building an empire that would one day grant them unlimited freedom. If only they saw the iceberg lurking on the horizon, a restless craving for novelty, fueled by Michael's unstoppable drive and the illusions of wealth. That craving would test the very foundation of their marriage and set the stage for a betrayal no one could have imagined. Success has a way of making some people believe they're invincible. Michael Whitmore, once grounded by Samantha's unassuming love, found himself intoxicated by the constant applause of the business world. Everywhere he went, praise echoed: brilliant, visionary, unstoppable. His name was spoken with reverence at board meetings and upscale soirees. Yet, behind the scenes, fatigue gnawed at him. Overbooked flights to Hong Kong to woo foreign investors. 3 phone calls at once from demanding venture partners. Back-to-back boardroom negotiations. It left him hungry for a spark of excitement that wasn't tinged by deals or deadlines. And that was when Chloe Smith stepped into the picture. She was introduced to him as a dynamic marketing consultant recommended by a close friend, Daniel Harrington, who had once loaned Michael the seed money to kickstart Whitmore and Associates. Chloe carried a polished aura, sleek black hair, porcelain skin, and a penchant for wearing flawless power suits with stiletto heels. She was known for turning public relations nightmares into triumphs, rebranding corporations seemingly overnight. Their first meeting was scheduled to discuss an upcoming expansion project in Miami. Samantha was busy in Los Angeles for an interior design conference, leaving Michael free for after-hours business. At a plush lounge in Midtown, over craft cocktails and low lighting, Chloe leaned in, showering Michael with compliments. She spoke not just about how she could bolster his brand, but about the mystique that surrounded Whitmore himself. "You have an aura of unstoppable confidence," she purred, swirling her martini. "And from everything I've heard, it's well-deserved." He gave a wry smile, feeling an unfamiliar flutter in his stomach. He tried to keep the conversation on business, but her gaze glided over him, electric. "You've done your homework," he observed, taking a measured sip of his bourbon. "I always do," Chloe responded with a knowing grin, "but my methods are never purely professional." If we're to reimagine the Whitmore brand, I want to understand the man behind the suits. What drives you? What keeps you up at night? For a moment, he felt a pang of guilt. Samantha was his wife, the one who should be hearing these introspective confessions. Yet, there was a dangerous allure in speaking so candidly with a stranger who seemed enthralled by his every word. So, he found himself talking about the stresses he faced: boardroom politics, fear of failure, and the claustrophobic feeling that came from living life on the brink of the next big success. As the night wore on, the line between business and intimacy blurred. Chloe laughed at his jokes a bit too eagerly, her hand occasionally brushing his arm when she made a point. Michael, fueled by the rush of attention, didn't resist. By the time he left the lounge, their conversation had transcended any conventional business meeting. An invisible door had opened, inviting a temptation that beckoned him away from everything Samantha represented. At first, he told himself it was harmless flirtation. A few text messages, a drink or two here and there. He reasoned that alliances in business were often built on personal rapport. Samantha would understand if she ever discovered the friendly banter, wouldn't she? He was only expanding his network, forging crucial connections. But each time he saw Chloe, the tension escalated. She was a strategist in every sense, praising him, injecting subtle compliments about his looks, ignoring the fact that he was married. Or perhaps it was precisely that fact that excited her more. She began to send late-night texts, peppered with winking emojis. Great meeting today. Looking forward to more productive collaborations. He'd feel the faint hum of his phone on his bedside table, glance at Samantha's sleeping form, and decide that answering could wait until morning. Yet, the next day, he would find himself smiling privately at Chloe's messages, each time stepping closer to the boundary line he was about to cross. Meanwhile, Samantha noticed changes in Michael's demeanor. He came home later than usual, offered vague excuses about client dinners and emergency consults. His phone was glued to his hand, screen angled away whenever she was near. She wanted to believe it was just the typical demands of a flourishing business, but a sinking feeling began to tug at her heart. She started dreaming of him in the arms of a faceless woman, and she'd wake in cold sweat. She tried to dismiss these fears, focusing on her own design commissions and trusting that their bond was invincible. After all, they had weathered hectic schedules before. Yet, the strain was evident in every unreturned phone call, every half-hearted kiss goodbye. The bed they once shared with laughter and whispered confessions now felt as though it was occupied by strangers. Over the next few weeks, whispers of betrayal grew louder in Samantha's mind, though she struggled to find tangible proof. A distance crept into Michael's eyes, something guarded and secretive. The man who once confided in her about every small triumph or failure now seemed lost in his private world. And as her anxiety sharpened, her body began showing signs of a new development, one that would change her life forever. Samantha's days were a blur of mood swings, sleepless nights, and an unshakable fatigue that clung to her. It began subtly. She'd feel lightheaded while discussing layouts with clients, or nauseated by certain paint fumes that never bothered her before. At first, she attributed it to stress. But there were hints she couldn't ignore: the tenderness in her chest, the occasional cravings for odd food combinations. On a whim, she bought a pregnancy test from a nearby pharmacy. She waited until she was alone in the penthouse, heart pounding as she locked herself in the bathroom. Samantha watched the test window with trembling hands, recalling the many times she and Michael had spoken of children in those sweet early days. They'd joked about naming a girl after his grandmother, who once taught him how to read stock charts in secret, and a boy after her father, James, the kind man who always believed in her potential. When the results showed 2 pink lines, Samantha sank onto the bathroom floor in disbelief. She was pregnant, and for the first time in weeks, she felt an overpowering rush of joy. This was their dream, was it not? They had built a life together, and a child seemed like the natural next step. Maybe this could be the wake-up call Michael needed, the spark to revive their dwindling closeness. Her relation was shadowed by a knot of worry. The distance between them had become impossible to ignore. Still, she decided to share the news optimistically, hoping Michael would come back to her in heart and spirit. She made a special dinner that night, lamb chops with rosemary, his favorite. She set the table with crisp linens and lit tall, tapered candles, wanting to create a moment they'd remember forever. But Michael texted at 9 o'clock, saying he was caught up in a business meeting. Hours later, Samantha sat alone, the food gone cold, candles burned down. By the time he finally arrived, after midnight, Samantha was emotionally exhausted. She confronted him in the hallway, eyes brimming with tears. "I have something to tell you," she managed, voice trembling. He peered at her, worn from his day, but also carrying an underlying restlessness. "Samantha, can this wait until morning? I'm dead on my feet." She shook her head, leading him to the living room. She took a deep breath, then announced it softly. "Michael, the first pregnant." His initial reaction was a flicker of genuine surprise. A swirl of emotions danced across his features, shock, maybe even fleeting joy. But then, almost at once, the color drained from his face. He mumbled, That's big news," and pulled away, loosening his tie as though he needed air. Desperate to read him, Samantha pressed on, "I thought you'd be happy. We always talked about having kids someday." He gave a strained smile. "I am happy," he lied, forcing a quick hug. Then he stepped back, rummaging through the mail on the side table like the topic could be switched off with a flick. "We should, schedule an appointment, see a doctor." The moment that was supposed to be filled with laughter and tender embraces collapsed under the weight of his muted response. Samantha fought the urge to scream. She had pictured this scenario 1,000,000 times, his exclamation of delight, the tears of happiness. Instead, it felt like a damp, hollow afterthought. In the days that followed, Michael's mood grew more erratic. Samantha tried to bridge the gap, leaving him sweet notes, requesting him to come to her first prenatal appointment. He either arrived late or offered forced politeness, as though his body was present but his mind was trapped elsewhere. On more than one occasion, she caught him on whispered phone calls at odd hours. The name Chloe lit up his phone screen once, making Samantha's stomach twist. A swirl of conflicting emotions tore at Samantha. On one hand, she felt an instinctive protectiveness for her unborn child, wanting to create a harmonious home. On the other, she sensed betrayal creeping ever closer. She confronted Michael one morning as he dressed for work, her voice trembling with heartbreak. "Tell me if there's someone else," she pleaded. "I can't do this alone, Michael." He froze, adjusting his cufflinks with stiff, deliberate motions. "You're overthinking," he said tersely. "I've told you 1,000 times. It's just business. I'm under a ton of pressure. This child changes a lot of things. Okay, let's not complicate it with baseless accusations." She saw the flicker of guilt in his eyes, but also the stubbornness that forbade him from admitting the truth. Tears stung her cheeks as he brushed past, leaving her in a silence thick with unspoken confessions. Deep inside, Samantha knew that if she didn't act, she would be trapped in a cycle of lies. The baby deserved a father who was fully present, not a wandering soul. She was determined to find the truth, no matter how it shattered her illusions. Little did she know that truth would soon send both of their worlds spiraling beyond repair and set her on a path where a single phone call would reshape their destinies forever. Suspicions plagued Samantha's mind like a fever she couldn't sweat out. Michael's coldness festered. Each day, he seemed to slip further away from the man she married. Nighttime phone calls, suspicious text messages, and an unspoken tension grew between them. She'd find receipts in his pockets from overpriced restaurants she never visited, or notice stray whiffs of a perfume that wasn't hers. The more she confronted him, the more skillfully he deflected. Determined to break through the haze of secrecy, Samantha decided to confide in Emily Carter, her cousin and closest confidant. Emily was known for her sharp instincts. She worked as a legal assistant for a prestigious law firm, often helping gather evidence for complicated cases. Over tea in Emily's cozy apartment, Samantha poured out her frustrations, tears edging her voice. "I feel like I'm losing him," Samantha whispered, pressing a hand to her growing belly. "He's never home, he's distant when he is, and I found a text from someone named Chloe. He claims it's business, but he's lying." Emily frowned, stirring her tea vigorously. Men with wealth and power can let it go to their heads, but if he's messing around while you're pregnant, that's more than betrayal, Sam. It's cruelty. Samantha took a shaky breath. "I don't have concrete proof, just bits and pieces. I'm scared. I want to protect my child, but I also need to know the truth. If he's cheating, then everything we built is a lie." Emily gripped her hand. "Then let me help you. I know a private investigator, Mark Jefferson. He's discreet. We can gather evidence before confronting Michael directly." Though guilt clawed at her spying on the man she once trusted with her life, Samantha saw no alternative. That very week, Emily connected her with Mark Jefferson, a soft-spoken, methodical man who asked direct questions about Michael's routines, phone habits, and the vehicle he drove. He suggested they plant a small GPS tracker in Michael's luxury sedan and examine his call records. "I'll provide photographic evidence if there's any affair," Mark assured her. "You'll have everything you need to confront him, or to take legal action if it comes to that." Samantha's resolve wavered, but she went along, reasoning that her unborn child deserved clarity. Over the next few weeks, Mark sent her periodic updates. Michael's car parked at unknown addresses late at night, restaurant visits that suspiciously coincided with reservations made under Chloe Smith's name. Samantha's stomach churned each time she received a text from Mark, detailing times and dates. One rainy evening, Mark sent a message, "I have photos. We need to meet." With trembling hands, Samantha hurried to a small cafe near Times Square. Mark was waiting in a back booth, a manila folder in front of him. As she flipped through the pictures, her hands shook. There it was, undeniable proof. Michael with Chloe at an exclusive lounge, arms intertwined, leaning in close, lips meeting in a passionate kiss. Another photo showed them entering a luxury hotel, side by side, their faces too familiar. Samantha's vision blurred with tears. She had suspected an affair, but seeing it immortalized in photographs ripped her heart in two. She bit her lip to stifle a sob. "That's enough. I can't look at more." Mark's eyes were sympathetic. "I'm sorry. I know this is devastating, but you needed the truth. You're pregnant, and this man, he's deceiving you." Nodding numbly, Samantha closed the folder. Her world felt like it was spinning. The father of her child, the man she once adored, was entangled in an ongoing affair. How had it come to this? She stumbled out of the cafe, ignoring the cold rain soaking her hair. She wasn't sure where her feet were taking her, but she knew she couldn't go home to the penthouse they shared, not with these images burned into her mind. Eventually, she ended up in the lobby of Emily's apartment building, wet and shivering. Emily's warmth enveloped her in an instant, pulling her inside. Samantha broke down, sobbing into her cousin's arms. "I have proof," she managed through ragged breaths. He's with that woman. Emily's expression hardened. What are you going to do? Samantha stroked her belly, tears still dripping from her chin. I need to confront him, but I'm terrified. He's the father of my child, but he's also someone else's lover. I can't stay silent, Em. I have to fight back. He walked away from me and our baby the moment he chose her over us. That night, as thunder rattled the windows, Samantha vowed she would no longer be the victim. She would gather her strength, face Michael with the truth, and demand respect for her and their unborn child. No more illusions, no more lies. The next confrontation would either make or break what was left of their shattered marriage, and unbeknownst to both of them, the choices they made would ignite the downfall of Michael's carefully curated empire. Samantha was beyond calm as she stepped back into the penthouse. She felt a numb determination, as though an invisible shell had formed around her to ward off grief. She found Michael in the living room, typing away on his laptop, a phone call on speaker with one of his attorneys. He glanced up, startled by the cold intensity in her eyes. Samantha, he began, voice laced with distraction. I've got something important to finish. Could we talk lat? She strode over and slammed a manila folder onto the coffee table. The abrupt gesture cut his words short. He eyed the folder, a flicker of confusion, then a spike of alarm when he recognized the photographic evidence inside. Samantha crossed her arms, steeling herself for what might erupt next. Open it, she said. Her voice was calm but tinged with unmistakable fury. Michael slowly ended the call, his gaze flicking between her and the folder. With a trembling hand, he flipped it open. His face drained of color at the incriminating photos. Him and Chloe kissing, entering a hotel, sharing intimate moments. 1,000 excuses seemed to flash behind his eyes, but none made it past his lips. Samantha broke the silence. How could you do this to me, to us, while I'm pregnant with your child? Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. He groped for words, eventually offering a pathetically small defense. It's not what it looks like, Chloe and I. It started as business. I swear, she laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Business, late-night dinners, secret rendezvous at fancy hotels. This is your idea of business? Michael clenched his jaw, a storm of emotions swirling behind his eyes, shame, anger, and a flickering hint of regret. I don't expect you to understand, he said hoarsely. I never meant for this to go so far. It just happened. That was the breaking point. Samantha could no longer contain her rage. Nothing just happens. You made a choice, Michael. You chose another woman over me, over our baby, and you lied to my face every single day. He swallowed, looking away. Maybe if you'd been around more, she cut him off with a derisive scoff. Oh, do not blame your affair on me. We both worked hard. We both made sacrifices. I was willing to give up anything to support you, to share this life with you. But you destroyed that trust. Tears pricked her eyes, though she fought to keep her voice steady. She grabbed a suitcase from the hall closet, a preemptive move she'd made earlier, and began stuffing in clothes. Michael stood, panic etched in his face. Samantha, wait, you can't just walk away. We can work through this, especially now with the baby. I'll end it with Chloe. She paused, turning to him with disbelief. You want me to stay and pretend none of this happened? Did you think your money and your reputation would magically fix the betrayal? He shook his head, stepping closer, but she stepped back, repelled by his proximity. Please, he whispered, voice cracking. Let's talk. Let's go to counseling. Anything. I can't lose everything. I don't want to lose you, or our child. For a moment, she almost softened. She had loved him deeply, had pictured a lifetime by his side. But the memory of Chloe's hands on him and his repeated lies, steel, trapped her resolve. She zipped her suitcase with trembling fingers. You already lost me, Michael, she murmured. I'm taking some time away. Maybe I'll figure out my next steps. But right now, all I know is I can't stay under the same roof as a man who betrayed me. He reached out, but she jerked away. Don't touch me. She left the penthouse, summoning an elevator that felt like it moved in slow motion. In the reflection of the elevator doors, she saw her own tear-streaked face. Yet, beneath the sorrow lay a fierce determination, the maternal instinct to protect her unborn child from a toxic environment. Outside, the city lights glared down, indifferent to her heartbreak. Michael stood in the empty living room, the folder's photos scattering across the coffee table. A wave of panic seized him. His perfect life, the one he had skillfully built, was unraveling. He cursed under his breath, then snatched his phone to call Chloe. She answered on the second ring, her voice dripping with concern, but he barely registered the words. He realized, with a gut-wrenching jolt, that he had no idea how to fix the monumental mess he created. The next few days were a living hell for both of them. Samantha moved in temporarily with Emily, who offered unwavering support, and her spare bedroom. She refused Michael's frantic calls, reading his text messages only to gauge if he was stable enough not to do anything drastic. For his part, Michael found himself drowning in remorse, yet resentful that Samantha wouldn't give him another chance. He tried to bury himself in work, but his focus was shattered. Rumors swirled among his staff, hushed whispers of personal drama, sightings of him and Chloe, Samantha's abrupt departure. Investors raised eyebrows, though still enthralled by Michael's track record, oblivious to the storm that was gathering. Little did Michael know, the darkest clouds had yet to form because Samantha, battered by heartbreak, was about to realize she possessed a weapon more powerful than she ever imagined. One phone call away from toppling the empire he prized above all else. Chloe Smith sensed the opportunity of a lifetime. With Samantha out of the penthouse and Michael in an emotional tailspin, she glided closer to him, offering sympathy laced with cunning. She massaged his shoulders after a grueling day, whispered assurances that he was too talented, too brilliant to be dragged down by domestic drama. In truth, Chloe never cared about the moral implications. She was drawn to Michael's power, and the cracks in his marriage were her stepping stones to influence. She envisioned a future where she stood at Michael's side, not as a clandestine lover, but as a recognized partner in both business and life. And it seemed, for the moment, that he might let her in that deeply. One Friday evening, Michael opened up a bottle of expensive wine in the penthouse he once shared with Samantha. It was a hollow place now, Samantha's belongings mostly gone, her scent replaced by the faint trace of Chloe's perfume. They toasted to the upcoming launch of Michael's new real estate venture in Miami. Despite his personal turmoil, Michael still managed to sign a major deal for a luxury high-rise project, and Chloe wanted to celebrate. As the night wore on, she pressed him about consolidating their ambitions. "Why not let me handle your public relations full-time?" she teased, lips curving into a predatory smile. "We work so well together. Let me be your partner, not just your consultant." He swirled his glass, eyes clouded with exhaustion. "I need time, Chloe. My life is upside down. Samantha is pregnant. I can't just toss her aside." A flash of irritation crossed Chloe's face. She reached out, touching his arm gently. "I'm not suggesting you ignore your responsibilities. But face it, your marriage is over, Michael. Why not move forward with someone who actually understands you, who sees your potential?" He gazed into her dark eyes, torn between guilt and the allure of unconditional praise. Samantha had always seen him as a man with flaws, reminding him to slow down, to value family. Chloe, by contrast, elevated him, feeding the notion that he was unstoppable, in a twisted way that felt like respite from the pain. "You're right. My marriage is. It's broken," he admitted quietly, taking another sip of wine. Chloe's nails lightly grazed his shoulder. Let's focus on what we can create together. I can help you spin this. We'll release a statement about an amicable separation. Keep the details hush, hush. Investors won't blink as long as they think you're still profitable and stable. But I need to be in the loop, Michael working side by side with you, not from the sidelines. He considered her words. On some level, he recognized the risk. Chloe wasn't by his side because of some grand romance. She was enthralled by his wealth, his brand, the power to shape entire city blocks. But he was too battered by guilt and loneliness to resist. Maybe, just maybe, forging this partnership would fill the void Samantha had left behind. "All right," he muttered. "We'll talk specifics next week. I need to get the lawyers on board, see how to structure the new PR division." A triumphant glimmer brightened Chloe's gaze. She leaned in and kissed him, a slow, possessive gesture. In that moment, she felt certain she had snatched victory from Samantha, that she would be the one to stand beside Michael on the dais of success. Yet, beneath the surface, storms were gathering. Chloe might have cemented her place in Michael's bed, but she was unaware of the precarious finances that kept his empire afloat. Unbeknownst to her, Michael was juggling multiple lines of credit to finance the Miami project, leveraging nearly everything he owned to impress new investors. Meanwhile, Samantha, though reeling from betrayal, was finding her footing. She sought legal counsel for advice on child support, property rights, and possible divorce. She shared the incriminating evidence with Emily and her father, James, who was outraged. "No man betrays my daughter and escapes unscathed," he grumbled, vowing to stand by her side. The crucial turning point came when Samantha realized Michael's brand was built on a single pillar, his shiny public image. Investors poured money into Whitmore and Associates because they believed in Michael Whitmore, the unstoppable visionary. If that image cracked, everything would crumble. She had once shielded him from negative press, trusting his moral compass. Now she recognized that unveiling the truth, his affair, his unscrupulous deals could rattle the faith of key financiers. Still, she hesitated, torn between the desire for justice and the knowledge that toppling Michael's empire might also compromise her child's financial future. But the scales tipped when Michael started making threats through lawyers, trying to freeze joint accounts, demanding that she return gifts like the car she was using. It was as if he wanted to force her into silence. That was the final straw. Samantha contacted Simon Caldwell, an investigative reporter she'd met through a design client. She hinted she had information on corporate misconduct, shady expansions, and a personal scandal that would shock high society. Eager for a headline, Simon arranged a secret meeting. Samantha stared at her phone for a long time before making that call, her heart pounding. She could almost see Chloe smugly sipping champagne at the penthouse, reveling in her so-called triumph. But Samantha knew one thing: illusions of victory rarely last. The deeper the betrayal, the greater the reckoning to follow, and she was prepared to deliver it, even if it meant bringing down the man she once loved with all her heart. It was a chilly Tuesday morning when Samantha entered a nondescript cafe on the Lower East Side. She opted for a large coat and a soft hat pulled low, hoping not to be recognized. The city bustled outside, unaware that behind the cafe's fogged windows, a showdown was quietly unfolding. Simon Caldwell was already seated at a corner table, a worn leather messenger bag at his side. He stood when he saw Samantha, offering a polite handshake. She hadn't shared every detail over the phone, only enough to pique his curiosity. Words like fraud, real estate schemes, and affair. He motioned for her to sit, then leaned in. "You sounded urgent on the phone. Care to fill me in?" His gaze was sharp yet empathetic. As a journalist, he thrived on uncovering truths, but Samantha detected a note of compassion in his tone. Samantha inhaled, her chest tightening. She rested a hand on her baby bump beneath her coat. "I'm ready to talk about Michael Whitmore," she began softly. "About his personal indiscretions, yes, but also about something bigger: fabricated valuations, questionable offshore accounts, foreign partnerships that skirt legal boundaries." Simon's eyes widened. "That's quite the list of accusations. Do you have evidence?" She flipped open a slim portfolio. Account statements, email correspondences, text messages referencing hush money payoffs. "Michael once confided in me about these deals back when we were close. I also have proof of how he's doubling down on loans, funneling them into new projects to appear profitable. It's a house of cards." Simon whistled under his breath. "Whitmore and Associates is considered a juggernaut in real estate. People see him as unstoppable. This could be huge if it checks out." Samantha hesitated, steeling herself. "I'm aware. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe it was true. But there's more. He's threatened to freeze me out financially. I'm pregnant with his child, and let's just say he's not the man the public thinks he is." Simon's gaze flicked to her midsection. "I'm sorry," he offered gently. "If you're sure about this, we can launch a full investigation. But you need to be prepared. Michael will deny everything. The blowback could be immense." Samantha closed her eyes, remembering her wedding day, the promise of a lifetime by his side, and the avalanche of betrayal that followed. "I've lost my marriage. I might as well shed light on the truth. If he wants to fight me with lawyers, fine. He can't outrun the facts forever." They wrapped up, trading details. Simon would start by verifying her documents, contacting potential whistleblowers. He planned to keep Samantha's name confidential until absolutely necessary. She left the cafe feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Yes, the days ahead would be tumultuous, but she had made her choice. Meanwhile, Michael was holed up in a conference room at Whitmore and Associates, finalizing contracts for the Miami project. He donned his signature navy blue suit, but the easy confidence he once exuded was fraying at the edges. He noticed colleagues whispering in hallways. He heard rumors that something was brewing, some reporter sniffing around, requesting interviews about the firm's finances. His attorneys tried to keep him calm, citing that large companies often endured gossip. But Michael's gut churned with unease. Later that day, he got an abrupt phone call from Chloe. She sounded breathless. "Michael, I just heard from a contact at Morgan & Harris. They said there's talk of an expose. Some journalist is compiling data on suspicious dealings in your portfolio." "What's happening?" He clenched his jaw. "I don't know. I've heard murmurs, but nothing concrete." He paused. A heavy silence. "Do you think Samantha is behind this?" Chloe's voice dropped, icy. "She's the only one who'd have that level of access, right? She lived with you. She was your wife. She must know exactly where to strike." Michael sat heavily in his leather office chair, feeling the cushion envelop him in a claustrophobic embrace. "I need to call her," he muttered, more to himself than to Chloe. Chloe didn't bother hiding her annoyance. "You really think she'll pick up? She's out for blood, Michael. And if she has half a brain, she's definitely not going to warn you in advance." After hanging up with Chloe, Michael stared at his phone. A swirl of regret, fear, and anger bubbled inside him. He tapped Samantha's number, hands shaking. No answer. He tried twice more, until finally her voicemail kicked in, the gentle ring of her voice telling callers to leave a message. He left a terse voicemail, struggling to keep composure. "Samantha, call me back. We need to talk about whatever you think you're doing. This will hurt both of us if you go through with it. Please, just call me." Unbeknownst to him, Samantha received the message while meeting with Emily, carefully planning her next steps. She heard the desperation in his tone and felt a pang. Despite everything, she once loved him deeply. But she also knew he was far more concerned about his empire than their marriage or child. That day turned into a pivotal moment for them both. Simon's newspaper began reaching out to major players in real estate, to confirm key details. Quietly, a storm gathered force. Investors started questioning the rumors, calling Morgan and Harris for reassurance. The slightest sign of impropriety could trigger panic. The real estate market thrived on confidence. Should that confidence waver, a collapse could occur overnight. Michael was too consumed with damage control to see that Chloe, for all her sweet words, was already hedging her bets. She toyed with the idea of jumping ship if the public relations fallout was too great. In private, she scanned for new opportunities in the glitzy corridors of Manhattan's elite, leaving Michael to fight the battle. From Samantha's perspective, one phone call had unleashed the unstoppable momentum of truth. The man who had once believed himself untouchable was about to learn that arrogance and betrayal never remain hidden for long. And while she found no joy in playing the harbinger of his downfall, she was resolute. For the sake of her unborn child and for her own dignity, Michael needed to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how much it would cost him. Within a week, Simon Caldwell's article hit the front page of a prominent financial newspaper, Whitmore and Associates Under Fire. Allegations of shady deals, rapid over-leverage, and private scandal. The piece was thorough and damning, though it stopped short of confirming outright fraud. It included quotes from anonymous sources, rumored financial statements, and veiled references to a tumultuous personal scandal overshadowing Michael Whitmore's decisions. The real damage came afterward, like a series of dominoes toppling. Michael's phone exploded with calls from panicked investors, board members, and even longtime colleagues demanding explanations. The stock of his subsidiary venture, a smaller, publicly traded arm focused on luxury condos, plummeted on rumors of possible insolvency. Creditors called in unison to re-evaluate lines of credit. Morgan and Harris Associates, once a supportive partner, sent a curt letter declaring they would suspend further financing until a full audit verified the company's stability. Michael scrambled to hold emergency meetings. He tried to frame the article as unsubstantiated, claiming Samantha was behind it out of personal vendetta, but the damage was done. In the high-stakes world of real estate, trust is everything, and trust in Michael Whitmore was evaporating fast. Meanwhile, Chloe Smith discovered exactly how fickle Michael's world could be once it started collapsing. When she entered the Whitmore and Associates building, employees greeted her with tense stares, whispering that she was part of the scandal. The board members, who had once humored Michael's new consultant, now shunned her. Her phone rang less with business opportunities and more with calls from reporters seeking dirt. Seeing the empire crumble around her, Chloe pressed Michael about their future. "We need a plan," she insisted, cornering him in his office. "You can't let everything go under. Consolidate your assets, do whatever it takes to keep this afloat." He pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaustion etched into his features. "I'm trying, but the banks are freezing me out. Clients are pulling out of deals. You think I can snap my fingers and fix it?" She set her jaw. There must be something. A new investor, a new angle on PR. A flicker of desperation crossed her face. "What about your personal funds? Could we salvage a portion of your empire by injecting capital from your private accounts?" Michael glared at her, rage simmering. "My private accounts are nearly depleted, tied up in expansions, overheads, and yes, your extravagant business lunches and our nights out. There's not much left to throw around." Chloe's expression hardened. She saw the writing on the wall. Michael Whitmore was no longer the golden ticket she believed him to be. Her eyes shifted, calculating an exit strategy. "Then maybe we just need to cut our losses," she said lightly, as if it was no big deal. "We can walk away and start something smaller, more nimble, just the two of us." He laughed bitterly. "Walk away from what? The lawsuits? The debt? The public humiliation? There's no easy out, Chloe. I made the mistake of thinking I was untouchable, and now everyone wants a piece of me. Their conversation disintegrated into a venomous back and forth. By the end, Chloe stormed out, her illusions shattered. Michael sank into his office chair, shoulders shaking in silent despair. During this maelstrom, Samantha watched from the distance of Emily's apartment. She woke each day to new headlines about Michael's downfall. A swirl of emotions plagued her: heartbreak, anger, relief, and an odd sense of sorrow for the man who once worked so hard to build a better life. James Carter, her father, offered quiet reassurance, reminding her that she had done what was necessary to protect her future. Samantha's pregnancy advanced, despite the stress. Her medical checkup showed the baby growing healthy and strong. She refused to keep her phone off in case of emergencies, but she often ignored Michael's calls. She was aware he was struggling, yet she couldn't forget how he'd chosen to abandon her at her most vulnerable. Then, one afternoon, he showed up unexpectedly at Emily's doorstep. Samantha heard the buzzer and recognized his voice, subdued and desperate, through the intercom. Against her better judgment, she allowed him up to the apartment. He appeared in the hallway, looking disheveled bags under red-rimmed eyes, suit wrinkled. This was not the Michael Whitmore she'd married, the crisp man of control and polish. She let him in, crossing her arms protectively. "What do you want?" He swallowed hard, glancing around at the modest living room. "To talk, please." She nodded curtly, gesturing to a chair. He sank into it, clasping his hands together. There was no sign of the arrogant air he once carried. Instead, his voice was shaky, quiet. "My company is on the brink of bankruptcy. Lawsuits are piling up. Investors are vanishing." He raised haunted eyes to her. "I know you set this in motion, and I understand why." Samantha felt tears threaten, but she held them back. "I never intended to push you off a cliff, but you gave me no choice. You threatened me, froze me out, flaunted your affair. I couldn't stand by and watch you continue without consequences." He lowered his head. "I was an idiot, blinded by ambition, by Chloe's flattery. I messed up my marriage, my reputation, everything. Now I'm only certain of one thing. I don't want to lose the chance to be a father." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I know it means nothing at this point." Samantha's heart clenched at his remorse. She remembered the kind gestures he once showed, how he'd bring her flowers after a stressful workday, how he'd hold her close at night, whispering how lucky he felt. That man was nearly lost, replaced by this broken figure. She sighed, placing a protective hand on her belly. "I won't shut you out of our child's life, but you need to prove yourself first. Show you can be stable, show you'll prioritize your responsibilities. You can't waltz in and out, especially not after everything." His eyes lit with fragile hope. "I will. Whatever you need, child support, involvement in appointments, anything. I know I can't undo the harm I've done, but I want to be there for our baby." He paused, swallowing. "Chloe, she's gone. Left me the moment things got hard. Guess that was predictable." Samantha regarded him quietly. She felt no triumph in Chloe's departure. She only felt the weight of too many shattered dreams. After a moment she nodded. "We'll set ground rules. You can attend doctor's appointments, be present at the birth if you truly want to be part of this. But I'm not offering you anything more than that. Our marriage is over." He accepted this with a tight-lipped nod. A tear slid down his cheek, and he quickly wiped it away. "Thank you," he whispered. They spoke for a short while longer about practical details. Her due date was 2 months away. He promised to contribute to medical bills, though his finances were in freefall. Samantha told him she expected respect and honesty, no more manipulations, no illusions of reconciliation. They ended on a somber note, an unspoken understanding that they were forging a new path from the wreckage of their old life. And so Michael staggered back out into the hallway. He might be losing his firm, his penthouse and his fortune, but he hoped to salvage a piece of fatherhood from the rubble. Samantha stood at the doorway, a swirl of emotions in her chest, fear for the future, relief that the truth was finally out, and the faintest glimmer of empathy for a once loving man destroyed by his own greed. In the days that followed, the meltdown of Whitmore and Associates became a full-blown fiasco. Headlines screamed of lawsuits, real estate circles buzzed with gossip. Michael declared bankruptcy, the final surrender of an empire built on illusions. He began searching for a modest apartment and picking up freelance consulting gigs, trying to muster enough stability to keep his word to Samantha. For her part, Samantha embraced the chance to rebuild on her own terms. She secured new design contracts, forging a name distinct from Michael's. She began preparing the nursery for the baby, soft pastel colors, whimsical paintings, a far cry from the sterile opulence she once lived in. She found solace in the quiet knowledge that she had stood up for herself and her child when it mattered most, even if it meant dismantling the empire she helped create. At last, the story reached a poignant crossroad. Michael Whitmore was bankrupt, stripped of his illusions, yet on the cusp of fatherhood. Samantha Carter was a soon-to-be mother, forging her own independence. The ring of heartbreak still lingered, but so did a sense of possibility. Their paths might remain intertwined through parenthood, but never again as husband and wife. It was a new beginning for both, a chance to emerge from the ashes of a betrayal that once threatened to consume them entirely. Betrayal and heartbreak can destroy even the most carefully built illusions, but sometimes it's in the ashes where true strength is found. Michael discovered too late that love and loyalty aren't commodities to trade. No empire can stand without a solid moral foundation. Samantha, though shattered by his infidelity, reclaimed her power by revealing the truth, even if it meant upending the world she once helped Michael create. In the end, the life they share is no longer defined by broken vows, but by their commitment to a new child who deserves both parents' support. If this story gripped your heart and kept you reading until the final page, show it some love with a like. Share it with friends who might need a reminder that hope can be reborn from life's harshest lessons. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more tales of resilience, redemption, and the unexpected twists that make us all human. Your support helps keep these stories alive and reaching those who need them most.